My name is RJ Cowan, and I am from the Tyler area and currently reside in Tyler, Texas.
Yeah, you're in the East Texas piney woods over here. Uh,
Yep.
Not far from me. I think I don't know how far Longview is, 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah,
But
nothing crazy far.
so the reason you got on my radar is I was looking at the Pikes Peak Marathon results, and I think yours was pretty high up there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember how many people did it, and I had a goal to try to beat all the other sea level people. I don't think I accomplished that, but it was definitely a task for anybody coming from sea level, and if they didn't have any time at altitude, it was something else. So
Yeah.
those races will humble everybody, but it humbled me pretty significantly.
Yeah. You look like you did pretty well. I guess training in the Tyler area in East Texas with the hills probably helped you out a little bit. Um, is that kind of how you did a lot of that training going into that race? Just a lot of hill training?
So actually kind of a hail back to 2021, I had an up and over 10K. So we'd like do a big climb. This is in New Mexico, and then we'd bomb down the other side of it. Well, ascent, there was no down. And so when I was training for the New Mexico race, we actually have a 16% grade hill here in Tyler. It's about 100 feet. And I just go up and down, up and down, up and down. But for the ascent, I just did all treadmill, which I'm not a huge fan of treadmill. I don't know anyone who truly is, but it wasn't so bad. I do like 2 to 3 sessions, like two that were like jogging uphill at kind of the pace I wanted to do at altitude, just to get used to that like tiny little movement, right? I mean, it was like 5.5 miles an hour that I thought I could do at altitude. So it wasn't very fast, but put it on like 11, 12% grade. And then I have one session that was a lot harder, and I would go for like kind of started at an hour, and I do like 10 to 15% climb, but I would go pretty hard, like 6.5 mile on that grade, like 10 minutes per mile, 9 minutes per mile was pretty hard. And then I worked that up to 2 hours before actual race day. So lots of uphill treadmill stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you had a lot of like alone time on the treadmill. What do you do to occupy yourself, or were you just in your space, like in your head?
It was music. I've kind of gotten used to doing music over the years. When I was younger, we didn't even have, I'm aging myself here, but we didn't even have like MP3 players or anything. So gradually over time, like I got used to running with music. So now that's what I do. So get
Gotcha.
the playlist right and go for it. Yeah.
How'd you even get into running? Because now, and I'll let the listeners know, but from what it looks like, you have Run Tyler, which is your coaching program you offer, and you help
Yeah.
these people run PRs and really fast times, and then you yourself are very good at running, and you got a lot of wisdom and science behind it all. But how did that start? Like, where did you start with your running?
Yeah, actually, it was a family connection. There's some people who listen to country music may know Nico Moon. So Nico Moon, he's done like Good Time and different songs like that. And that's my cousin. His actual name is Nick Cowan, and he was a runner in high school. He was really good. He was like 9:19 in the 2 mile and like 4:19 in the mile. And I tell people this was the late 90s and early 2000s. So like a lot of kids are running fast now. I mean, 9:19 is still good for the two, but it's not like what it used to be. I mean, like back in the day, 9:19 is like an 8:59 now. Like, so he was really, really good. And he encouraged me to start running. So I didn't even know what cross country was. He asked me during one Thanksgiving, like family get together. He said, "Hey, you gonna run cross country, when you get to high school?" And I'm like, I don't know what that is at all. So, and my brain goes straight to, okay, across America, that's like 3,000 miles. So I mean, I did like to run, but I was thinking, I don't know if I can do 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
So I figured out that cross country is actually just a 3 mile race,
Yeah.
which still doesn't really compute. It's like, you're not going to cross much of the country, not even hardly part of the city. But um, anyway, so he got me into it, and I would do a few runs with him, and he would kick my butt, but he would encourage me, and so that's really how I got into running. Yeah.
Sweet man. And did you go to college? Did you run in college or no?
Yeah, yeah. Ran in college, actually ran for UT Tyler, and had a great coach, Bob Hepler, in that program. He's on the East Coast now, but he was a triathlete at the time, and he would try to get us to do some biking and some other stuff. And I was a pure runner at the time, so I resisted it as much as I could. but but yeah, so competing in college, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of biking, is that a bike right there behind you on the?
Oh yeah, yeah, I TT bike, time trial bike, back there. Yeah. So now I do a lot more cycling than I used to, and I joined a team called Toyota, Cryo RDT, and they're about to rebrand. But that's an international team. I connect up with some guys. Some guys I actually knew from my running days that are in the States, and then have some other teammates like Lars Weikert. He's a German. He was a two-time Olympian in rowing, and Aaron Borrell. He writes for Road.cc, and he's a elite cyclist competitor too. And so different guys like that I kind of linked up with and ended up getting in the cycling world. But really, the two passions I have now. I mean, I've kind of you said that you do ultras, or you're getting into ultras and doing trail running. I think on the running side, like trail running will always be a passion, but road, like running on the road, I just have gravitated
Yeah.
away from that. I mean, I will run on the road. Like a lot of my training runs will end up on the road somewhere, but as far as racing, like there's just nothing like, and even training runs, there's really nothing like doing trails. So cycling and trail running, those are kind of my two things that I'm still really into.
You might like I think it's called bike packing. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, yeah. I have a one friend who's kind of a mountain man, you know. He
Yeah.
actually packed up and moved to Colorado, took his family with him. He's really into that. I don't know if I would ever bike pack, actually. I don't know why, but I mean, it looks fun. It looks fun, but have you done anything like that before?
No, I haven't done any bike packing. I've done some road biking. Mountain biking scares me. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, I haven't dabbled in it. I've just heard about it. So
for
I
sure.
figured a lot of people don't know about it, but it does seem cool. I would bike pack if it was not technical single track trail.
For sure. I actually think some of the bike packing isn't that way. You know, like I want to say the Continental Divide Trail isn't super technical. Don't quote me on that because if it is, then but I feel like sections of it aren't incredibly so. Not like our mountain biking here. You know, if you go out to so Tyler State Park's a state park close to where I am and somewhat close to where you're located. That's pretty technical. And I tell people they pick up mountain biking. If you're not really good at it, don't clip in. Don't even go there, you know. Be able to bail your feet. I had a friend who he got a super nice mountain bike. He was all amped up. It was clipped in. And the plan was he was gonna ride and I was gonna run. And and he was thinking, okay, I'm gonna ride as fast as you're gonna run. So we thought, okay, we'll do like a training session together that way. But he was running into a tree like every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And like the first two I checked on him, like, you okay, you okay, you okay? He's like, oh, I'm good, man, I'm good. By the time he hit like the third tree, I just said, hey, I'm gonna go run. I'm gonna let you figure out what you got going on here. But yeah, it can get sketch for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I try to stay away from the mountain bikes. It's too scary for me. Too scary. I like being on my own 2 feet. But speaking of trail running though, so how do you even find trail running? How did that come about in your life?
Oh man. Um, I can't remember like my very first event, like why I signed up or anything like that. Oh no, I think yeah, I can recall now. Like for some reason, I think one of my teammates said, "Hey, let's go out to Tyler State Park and train there a couple of times." And I was always fascinated, and this is even pre-GPS days. And like, but we knew like the general distance of the trail. And I always just felt so disoriented. Like I didn't know exactly where we were, because I didn't know the trail well, but my teammate did. And they were all pretty fast, but they would just get to going. But then my friend who knew the trail, he'd be like, "Hey, that mile is like a 7:30." But I felt like we were hauling. Like, I mean, we're pushing, pushing, pushing. And then we do another one, and I'm thinking we're running like 550 or six flat. I mean, that's like on the road, that's what it felt like it would be.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's like another 720, 730. So that was kind of like introduction to trails. And I signed up for one at one point, but I mean, that's kind of the nice thing, right? With trails, ultra, it's like if you're the neurotic type who cares about your time, just stop caring about it, because you're going to be out there and you're hopefully going to have a good time, and the pace just doesn't matter. But there's also a doctor in the area. I don't you may have heard of her, I'm not sure, but Dr. Kathy Fiesler.
Mm.
She's retired now. She was actually one of the nation's like premier running doctors
Wow.
for a long time. Boston Marathon invited her up tons of times, and she kind of like me and one of my teammates. I guess we kind of had that like we just look like people who would eventually be granola and running the trails, I guess, type thing. And she kind of said, "You and this other guy named Warren, you guys are going to do trails when you're older." And we're like, at the time, we're like, "Nah, that doesn't sound like us."
That's funny.
But she was right. She was right, and she was really into ultras. But I mean, like now, I feel like a lot more people have found it and are into it. I mean, it's still a fringe thing overall. But like compared to what it used to be, I mean, it used to be a really small community. So she was doing it in the 90s. I don't know if she was doing the 80s, but like 100Ks and stuff like that, way before it was well known. But
Yeah.
so kind of the gel of those things, like someone tricking me to go out into the trails, and then Dr. Fiesler like saying some sort of prophecy over over I'm gonna do it later.
Yeah, that's sweet, man. And I guess you ended up going through with it. And what kind of feats have you done on the trails since you've signed up for your first race?
Yeah. So I've done a few trail marathons. Those are mostly Texas Hill Country.
Yep.
I did do the Grasslands one in that kind of North Texas area.
Yeah.
And I just remember both, like the Grasslands one and one that was called Pandora's Box of Rocks. I remember those two in particular. I just, again, because it's trail and it's a new trail I've never been on, and I'm just antsy. I'll just hunt anybody who's in the lead. And so I just remember both of those, like just like shooting off, going with whoever went, and then being pretty dog tired the last like 10 miles of both of those. But enjoyed those races. I probably top 10 on both of those. But then I did a lot of like 25K to 30K. And I really like that distance. I know that and I'll actually say this for anyone who's like looking to do trails, like the stigma is you've got to do ultra if you're going to get in the trails. But I mean, and that's great. Ultra's fun. And I did do an ultra out at Rocky Raccoon. My friend won that day. We were training together. We were supposed to do more training sessions together than we did, but we did train together. And then he smacked me around race day. But so, I mean, there's races that are, 5K, 10K. There is a part of me that's like, if you can get in the trails, go ahead and go further than 5K. If you have the fitness for it, at least go and enjoy the trails for a while. But I mean, there are less than marathon distance races that are still a blast. You still get to go have fun in the woods. But yeah, I did a lot of 25Ks. I probably won about 10 of those. And that was so it was like my Texas-based results that I submitted to Pikes Peak, and they were, because all my results were good from the Texas stuff. They were like, "Ooh, you're number 67, like ranked from best to last." And I finished like 100 and something because I couldn't handle the altitude. So I don't know if you saw it. Did you see the top of the results for Pikes Peak?
Yeah, I saw a couple of them, but it's very impressive. I mean, every year you get people that are just faster and faster. I guess it's just part of the evolution of the sport. But yeah, I mean, it
So
looked pretty good.
so Remy Balnet, I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
It's like what I've been trying to describe to people is it is this probably the single greatest climbing effort in recorded history.
Wow.
Like because Matt Carpenter had this unbeatable, unbreakable record for 30 years. A lot, world's best came and tried to do it. Guys with 90 plus VO2 maxes. If anyone's ever looked at VO2 max, like the
Really?
highest that's ever been recorded is 97. That's the highest that's ever been recorded. So these are guys that are within the ballpark of the greatest endurance engines of all time. And they came, they they did the ascent, didn't beat Matt's record, and Remy beat it by like 43 seconds, which given it's like a 2 hour race, I mean 43 is not all that much, but he did nip it. And we did have snow for the last for Remy, it would be for the last like 35 minutes of his run. For me, it was like the last hour of the go. But it was slick enough that if you're moving fast, so it was an unbelievable performance. And I hope there's articles out there somewhere about it because it was incredible.
Yeah, yeah. That it's truly amazing to see, man, to see some of these people come out and perform at the level they do. Um, it's like these people, they just, it's cool to see the best of the best in the world that we have today. As far
Yeah,
as, uh, I guess that really goes for everything. But it's crazy to fathom and to think that like in the future, like I don't know if we're ever gonna see a peak in running as far as like a peak of people's physical abilities. If
all
there's
right.
like I don't know if there's a roof on that.
Yeah,
Um, but it'd be cool to see if there was. You know what I mean? Uh,
yeah.
like
I think it's going to be that curve where like it slows down as you
yeah,
get to like what the human body can accomplish. Um, but and so we've seen the slowdown, right? But then tech comes into, so it's really hard to figure out like exactly the intermingling of tech because there's a miler, Jim Ryan, who went 3:51. He had the world record at the time in the mile, but the tracks that they did it on, the spikes they had it in. I mean, you could take a guess. No one's ever going to know exactly how fast, but it would probably be, I don't know if I had to say, probably be around a 3:44. I mean, the record's 3:43 now. But in other words, his 3:51 was like worth more than what he had done at the time if he had everything they had now. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I definitely think it's going to get faster, and we're going to see that with the marathon soon, right? I mean, Iliad's been the top of the ranks for a long time, and I mean, honestly, hopefully he's got a couple more years. But there was that 22 or 23-year-old. I mean, he's not very old. He got the number two time ever. So he's got a good shot. I mean, as long as there have been flash in the pan careers, and Iliad was actually one of the first to truly have like a 2 decade career. Kenenisa Bekele, he had a pretty long career, but he just couldn't quite get his footing back. So Iliad's really rare. Also, a funny story about him was when he was like 17 or 18, for some reason he had a pretty weathered face and everyone thought he was I think they call it age doping, but in other words
oh, yeah,
lying about his age. So at the time when he was like 17, some people were like, oh, this dude's like 25. So like I think over time like we figured out that he really probably was 17 when he was 17, because if he actually was 8 years older, like he'd be like 48 right now, and there's no way he'd be doing what he's doing. But there was some speculation like 2 decades ago.
yeah. I read a book on Kenyans called Running with the Kenyans.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it was given to me by my professor who was from Kenya in
Mm.
college, and I read the book, and it turns out that, like Kenyans, a lot of them don't know their age; they just guess,
Yeah.
and that's very common.
Was it More Fire? Was it that book? Did it have was the title
It's
of it
it's
More
called
Fire?
It's called Running with the Kenyans. Uh,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't know who the author is.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read one that probably covered like similar topics, but it was called More Fire. And I think its subtitle was like The Kenyan Way or something like that. And some of the stories were great and hilarious. Like one of them was this guy who had never worn shoes before, and they had a coach from the West who came over, was trying to help these kids out. That's kind of what Brother Tom O'Connell did in E10. Uh, so Calm, he worked with a bunch of different Kenyans, and a lot of them became world champions and stuff like that. But he was kind of working in the high schools, but he was just like a missionary. Anyway, so this coach gives this kid who had never had shoes before a pair of spikes. He runs the race, runs pretty darn well. You know, some of them are just super talented. It's like a low 14 5K. And and after the race, the coach goes, "Hey, how are those spikes? You know, it's your first time ever wearing shoes. Like it wasn't, I know it wasn't a perfect size. It's like what we had, but how were they?" And the kid goes, "Yeah, they were okay, but kind of hurt my foot a little bit." And like later, after he had taken off the spikes, handed back to the coach reached in, and his pen that he was like writing on his clipboard with was still in the shoe. So because this kid had never worn shoes before, he didn't know they're supposed to feel like, so he ran with the pen
That's
along
funny.
the shoe the whole time. So yeah.
That's funny, man. Yeah, I in the book I read about the Kenyans, I actually read a story that kind of have a different outcome, but they're similar in the fact that they had these really fast kids when they were younger, uh, that ran barefoot. They put shoes on them, and they started running a lot slower. And
A
all
lot
the
slower. Oh, it's funny you say that.
yeah,
Funny
yeah,
you say that. I do a lot of barefoot running now. I only on like plush fields, you know, like soccer fields. Some people ask me like, "You do it on the road?" I did it like twice, and it tore my little tender feet up. But um, yeah, I'm a lot faster barefoot than shoes. Like, and I even test this out with like some go as hard as I can performances during COVID year. You know, there's like no races. So I was kind of just doing time trials on the road, and I did a couple of time trials barefoot. And on the road, I think at the time I was running like 16:30 5K, and barefoot I went 15:56.
wow,
And I've always been like a weight weenie with shoes. I
yeah,
mean, I think the thing, and I have long legs. And if you think about like the biomechanics of moving like a pendulum, right? I mean, the more weight that's on the end of a pendulum, the harder it is to swing through. But I feel like, especially if your legs are long, it's going to impact you that much more because it's a longer pendulum that you're swinging with the weight on the end of it.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just funny. But barefoot running is great. I almost put it with trail running. Like trail running super fun, barefoot running super fun.
Just combined the two.
That's right. Oh yeah, yeah. If I ever toughen them up enough, yeah.
Yeah, as long as you
You
don't
ever bear or
course
anything
with
like
some
that?
rocks or something like that, you'll be good.
Yeah, yeah. I actually did a my graduate research was barefoot versus shoe running.
Oh yeah.
And we did ground reaction forces, and this has been shown many times now. But just share kind of what we found when we were studying all this kind of stuff is that um, people's biomechanics. Let me just summarize. They just got better. Like you take the shoes off, they just get biomechanics just get better. So ground reaction force goes down. That's been well demonstrated. So you just don't hit the ground as hard when you're barefoot. Cadence goes up, and the way that people landed. Like if people happen to land with their foot out in front of their center of mass, so kind of over people call that overstriding. If they did that in shoes, that went away with barefoot. Because in a way, it's almost impossible to do that barefoot
Yeah.
because your brain it's trying to protect you, and that's part of why you speed up your cadence and you hit the ground not as hard because you're trying to protect your feet and your body and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is just an aside, but I've done like biomechanical analysis kind of out in the field with people, taking pictures, seeing how they're moving, trying to pick out any problems that they have. And one of the things I tell people, if they have a plush surface, they have some place they're not going to step on a hypodermic needle or something like that, or scrape their feet. like if you want to improve your biomechanics pretty quickly, just take your shoes off. And then when you put your shoes back on, you kind of train your brain, train your muscles to move in an appropriate manner. Put your shoes back on and try to run in a similar way. There's lots of ideas out there. There's like the pose method. I'm not a huge fan of the pose method. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure people have had success off of it, but I definitely am a believer in like see how you move barefoot, and then try to mimic that. And actually, with the athletes that were good runners and they had good biomechanics, they ran almost identically shoes barefoot.
Hmm.
They did. Now their ground reaction force was still less, all that kind of stuff, but the angles in their knee and where their foot landed, all that kind of stuff, that was almost exactly the same barefoot or shoes. But it was the people who had, overstriding and stuff like that, that got all messed up with shoes on.
That's interesting, man. Yeah, I remember early college days running. We'd run barefoot on our turf football field.
Yeah.
And then we weren't allowed to run on the football field
Usually,
anymore. Do what?
but was it cool down usually that y'all did that?
Yeah, yeah. Cool down. Yep, cool down. And then we'd do barefoot strides too. Those are really
Oh,
great. Uh,
nice.
but yeah, and then we got kicked off the football field. We weren't allowed to run on there anymore, so we stopped doing that. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember just being so in tune and feeling so light on my feet whenever I used to train like that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, don't gravitate away from it forever. I mean, it seems to help. I mean, and it's fun.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
need to hop back on it. Yeah. And so if you're ever, if anyone's ever, I guess if they struggle with that foot strike, that heel strike, just take your shoes off and it'll immediately fix it. So
For most people, yeah. I actually can't think of an example where it didn't switch. So yeah.
yeah, you almost have to. You almost have to
Yeah.
land
Yeah.
on your
Um,
forefoot.
Yeah, that's why I'm sure there's going to be somebody who eventually, they'll be like, "Oh, it didn't work for me." But that's kind of making my mind track. It's a little bit different topic, but talking about like nutrition and
Yeah,
ingestion doesn't bother your stomach. Like some people that can eat almost anything because they're kind of, I call it an iron stomach.
yeah,
They can, and you can train your gut too. Research has shown that too, that you can train your gut. Over time, if you have problems with the food that you eat and all that kind of stuff, you can kind of make yourself a little more adept to that. But Morton is like one of many products, and Tailwind's great too. Tailwind's really big in the ultra and trail community. I think that's a great product too. And there's several that others that are good on the stomach. For me, I kind of keep coming back around to Morton, and the way I'm linking this to the barefoot thing is that I've told people that I've recommended to. I said I haven't yet had one person say they had stomach problems on this stuff. So if you do, you'll be the first. So I'm still waiting on the first person to say, "Oh,
yeah.
barefoot didn't correct the way my foot hit," and I'm still waiting for the first person to say, "Oh, Morton made my stomach upset." So
Interesting. Morton, is that like a gel packet or like is it a drink or what is that?
yeah, they have the gels, they have the drink mix, but it's just, I mean, it's sugar basically. I mean, it's like all those other carbohydrate gels and goos, but the way the stomach treats it is it treats it like water. So they kind of put it in what they call a hydrogel. I'm not sponsored by Morton, anything like that, and I teach sport nutrition at UT Tyler as well, and I tell my students that too because I'm kind of just a connoisseur of what are the best products out
Yeah.
there. And really, I mean, other products like Tailwind, in my mind, this is my own little tier system. Tailwind's not that far away from Morton. I mean, they're both great. But for some reason, I just kind of keep coming back to Morton in terms of like, if I'm going to recommend what's the best, like, hyperdrive fuel that I'm pretty sure is not going to upset your stomach. That's usually what I recommend.
Mm. I just had a guy who ran a 100K we put on, and we have Naked Tailwind out there. It's the Naked flavor Tailwind,
We
and
love stuff.
he
Yeah.
um he he had messaged me. He was like, "Man, like I thrived off that stuff." He was the only guy. It was a hot day. He was the only guy that kept that whenever I went and checked everybody out on the trail, he was the only guy that was running, and he looked good.
No,
And
I'm glad you put that on course. Yeah, I have a bag of the naked tailwind in my
yeah,
kitchen right now. But I similarly, it was actually Grasslands marathon where I needed to fill up, and they were doing naked tailwind on course at that race, and that was the only thing that brought me back to life. You know, like I was, and so I'd actually agree that the real hot days, I actually slightly prefer tailwind because I think that their electrolyte content is a
yeah,
little higher. So yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, they're good. We use them. So I tried Nick Bear electrolyte his electrolytes BPN Bear Performance Nutrition, and it was like this like lemon lime flavor, and I used it, and it tasted really really good, and I used that up, and then whenever I ran out, I didn't reorder anymore because I'd actually thrown it up. I have high stomach acidity, and
Oh,
that lemon lime flavor didn't go too well with my stomach acidity. So I hopped back over to Tailwind, and whenever I tried it, the naked flavor again, it tasted so bad compared to what I was having
okay.
with his because his electrolyte mix tasted so good. Like it was almost addictive. It tasted so good. And so when I switched over to the naked tailwind, I was like, oh, like what is this stuff? So now at our races we offer tailwind and then usually like Gatorade, or I'm trying to look for somebody to partner with us there on the other one. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
No,
not for
that
everybody.
one's great. I really, and I mean, yeah, if you're putting on races in Texas, like sweating out, losing a ton of electrolytes, I mean, that's going to be a hallmark of almost every race you do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I love Tailwind for, oh, I had that good experience with it at Grasslands. I was like, oh, stuff's the jam.
Yeah, it's really that's one thing I liked is how easy it was on the gut as far as like when I looked into them. But you know, how does your stomach do out on the trail whenever you're fueling and putting food down? Um, how does your stomach typically uh, respond to doing long, drawn out endurance events?
Oh, not the best. I've really wrestled that. In fact, I say my two weaknesses in the really long stuff are calves,
Mm,
on the muscular side.
yeah,
So lower leg in general, and then the other is gut. I've told myself because I got two boys and they're pretty young, so I'm real focused on. I'm still competing and stuff like that, but ultra has a big time demand, so I know I'll probably come back to it at some point in time if the Lord allows me to. My body's still working good and all that kind of stuff. But I've always told myself I get in the gym more and train my gut a bit as well. But to the point of like in the gym, I mean that's something that I tell anyone who's even thinking about getting the ultra bug. I mean, sure you can get away with not spending time in the gym, but the thing about ultra is it's going to expose a weakness. There's going to be a weakness that's exposed. So for me, it's my lower leg. Like that's the first thing to give up. It's like calves start to give up, then hip flexors start to give up, and then I can have a cascade from there. But someone else it may be their quads give up first. Obviously, if it's got a lot of downhill. Almost everyone's quads get trash, but once you kind of identify in your like really long training sessions, what's your weakest link? Like you got to work on that. And then when you work on that, fact of the matter is that may not be your weakest link anymore. And then you find that something else is now your weakest link. So there's usually always something that you can go into the weight room and fix, and try to improve or even try to mimic the trail. If you don't have the trail, like that's something after doing pikes, I didn't know pikes like most technical trail, or if it has some technical sections, are going to have like this step up thing, where you're lifting your foot up pretty high and you're really having to do a pretty big step up, So if you went into the gym and did like a plyo box, it would need to be a pretty tall one. So I did some of that stuff in preparation, but it wasn't high enough. I even told myself I should have done like full hour sessions. I was kind of mixing my like uphill treadmill grade. I would like run and then I go over to a plyo box and do like 2 minutes plyo box, come back to run, 2 minutes plyo box, just to practice that step up motion. But I was like, after doing the actual course, I was like, you either live on the mountain, which that's the best of all worlds, or if you can't, like, do like really long sessions where you're doing step ups. Otherwise, your hamstrings are gonna hate you once you get to racing.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think of these people that live out in like South Texas, like Houston area, Florida, anywhere on the coast where it's super flat, and I think if you're training for a race, you just need to hop on the stair climber or the plyo
Stairs
box,
are good, yeah. But even the stairs, like some of those rock step ups, that the good spot for your foot to slot into is sometimes just much higher than what a step's going to give you. So it can be tough, yeah, if you don't have something that mimics it real well. What's your favorite race that you've done?
My favorite race. I've done a handful, and I would say my favorite race was down in Louisiana. It was called Wild Azalea Trail Challenge. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And they have a bus that drops you off at a trailhead, so it's a point to point.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and it goes up to a 50 mile, yeah, a 50 mile distance. And the 50 mile, um, I might be point to point, but I think it's an out and back. I'm not sure on that one, but
Yeah,
that was a cool course because it was really hilly there, but it was beautiful as far as the way the pine trees grow there, you can just see throughout the whole forest. It's very pretty. Um, and it's a good course. It's a good put together race, and I was able to run pretty fast out there on
yeah,
for trail. Like I was probably going maybe I don't remember the exact pace I was going, but around 7-8 minute pace for trail when it was hilly, which is
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah.
And I did their half marathon there, and yeah, that was probably my favorite race just because of the scenery and the way the race is set up. You finish, and they got a bunch of jambalaya that you can eat after, and
Oh, yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah.
so. I just like the atmosphere of that race and the scenery there. It's just you're really in the woods, man. It feels like Louisiana. So
Yeah, yeah. No, Louisiana will take care of you post race, man. I did a race, Crescent City Classic. It's a 10K in New
yeah,
Orleans. I did that like 6 different years because my mom actually lives in the New Orleans area. But jambalaya after the race every time, and I won't even say they didn't even like stop you if you wanted a second, third, fourth. So, I
yeah.
mean, I have good memories of that one.
Oh yeah.
What's your dream race?
Dream race. The Arkansas Traveler 100. I would
Well,
say.
where at Arkansas?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
just because I went to college there. I ran there in college, and then the Ouachita and Ozark Mountains are just beautiful. And even though
yeah.
that trail is majority like dirt gravelish road, like back roads, like Jeep, like almost kind of like Jeep roads. Um, it's still a really well supported race, and it's a very old, has a lot of history to it. So that's the dream race, man. And the next year or two, I think it's important to work up as a ultra marathoner. And I've seen people tour; they go from 0 to 100 miles in a year, and I'm trying to go to 0 to 100 miles over the course of 5 years. I think that's important to have the longevity. Um,
I 100% agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like running such a nice sport because you can participate in it for a long time. And sure, you may start to get slower after age 40 or 50, but you're definitely going to get a lot slower after age 40 or 50 if you've like done the timing wrong when you're young, and rushed into these super long distances. So I think it's smart to take a little bit of time, working up in distance. I mean, I've even seen, now this is road, but I've even seen people who hopped into road marathon too fast, and they were just never the same. Their bodies weren't quite ready for it.
yeah,
We know that like people can prepare for marathons in a way that they'd be just fine, and do many, 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 many of them. But you know, sometimes it's just a bridge too far, if you rush the whole process getting there. So yeah, I think it's smart to take a little bit of time. But this is a 100 miler, not 100K in Arkansas. It's 100 miles.
100 miles. Yep.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, I did an Arkansas race. It was kind of one of those, like, I think it was about 18 miles, so it wasn't quite marathon, but beautiful race. But a lot of the Arkansanians, they do a lot of the races in that area. So I met a lot of those guys there, and I've kind of kept up with some of them.
You kind of
And
look
I
like a guy from Arkansas a little bit.
maybe a
Yeah,
little
with the
bit. Yeah,
flannel and the hat and the
yeah,
beard.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're doing like there's like a Love It series. I don't know if you heard the Love
Yeah.
It. Yeah, and I want to say that's on a lot of those like Jeep trails that you're talking about as well.
Um,
So
well, some of it, I think some of it's single track. I don't know. I'd have to look into it.
yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool, man.
that's a
Yeah,
cool group right there. Or the Arkansas Ultra Running and Trail Community or something. And it's all donation based. It's pretty cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's really cool.
they do a
Yeah,
lot of big ultras there, and it's like old school feel to it. So
yeah. Well, the race that I did in Arkansas, it was free.
yeah,
And he basically the race director just said, just don't get yourself killed. I can't remember if I don't think it was Pinnacle Mountain. No, Mount Magazine. It was Mount Magazine.
yeah,
And there is a rock ledge, and there's kind of like a shelf that comes off. So it's like ledge and like a rock shelf that comes out here. So you're on the track going like that. You don't want to go this way, and you don't want to tuck in too far that way, because these like way I say it is it can tomahawk you. And so the race director said the year prior, someone got tomahawked by the rock ledge. And so he's like, you got to watch out. And unfortunately, another guy got boom, just smash. And a friend that I went to that race with, he was with that runner when it happened, was able to help him get to the hospital. He's fine. From what I know he got to hospital and everything, but I didn't see my friend like we knew we were gonna be like a little bit separated, but I didn't. After like 15 minutes, I was done. He wasn't there. I'm thinking, where in the world is he? Saw him later that day, but yeah, he stopped his race, and helped that guy out. It's pretty wild, but that's the other thing I like about the trail community. Like, so that Mount Magazine race, we're doing a technical descent. I mean, and this is top two technical descents I've ever done. The other was the up and over in New Mexico. When we came down on that one, it was like negative 40% at one spot. I mean,
jeez,
where all you can do is just put your heels into the
yeah,
ground. That's your only choice. Anyway, so it wasn't as technical as that one, but at Mount Magazine, and I caught something and I just tilted forward, and we're on a slant down pretty good, and my knee hit the ground pretty hard. I heard a pop. I'm pretty sure I heard a pop. I mean, into that story is that nothing did, but immediately my brain goes, that could have been ACL or something, just
yeah,
the way I landed on my knee. There was a physical therapist and a nurse who I was racing next to, and they're just both so kind. Both of those guys, they stopped. They made sure I was okay. I didn't know if I was even going to be able to run anymore. I Thankfully it kind of shook off after like 5 minutes, which I was surprised, just the way I thumped it. And maybe I snapped a stick, I don't know, but like on my way down. But those guys were great. And one of the guys actually trounced me in the last 2 miles, so which made me feel good, because I was like, dude, I slowed you down. Actually, that guy would have won the race if they hadn't have stopped to help me, because we were gaining on the leader like really fast towards the end. So
well, yeah, yeah. That was super nice of him to put you first over his win. So
yeah, yeah. So shout out to the Arkansas trail community.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
pretty cool crew right there. Yeah, man. Yeah, whenever you get into some of those mountain races, it gets pretty crazy out there, man.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. When we don't really have a whole lot of it to work with, it gets tough. And uh I'm trying to remember his name. It's Matt something, but he runs for Nike Trail. He's a pro runner for Nike Trail. He came out to Tyler State Park to open a season in 2021 or something like that.
Yeah,
And I think that Tyler State Park, I know it's not the most technical, but I'm still, you got to hop rocks, roots, all that kind of stuff. I think it was nothing for him, just because some of the trails he's used to in Colorado. I also thought there's like an 11-mile loop out there. He did the 22 miler, and there's this 11-mile loop, the fastest I'd ever gone is an hour 13. And I thought there was almost no way to go under 110 just because of like how tight the turns are and all that kind of stuff. Like, and the faster you go, the tighter the turns feel. And he went 106, 108 on
Gee.
that course. Like his first lap was 66 minutes, second lap was 68. He did fall once, but I was still just like, well, that's why you're a pro. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. You're gonna have to give me a tour of Tyler State Park. I've never ran there,
Yeah,
surprisingly.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we should grab a jog out there. Yes, it's fun.
Yeah, I haven't. I've been meaning to go out there for quite a while. So
Yeah,
I know Red in the Rose coming up in I think January. So
yeah, yeah,
hopefully I don't have anything planned that
yeah.
weekend, so I could come out there. So
Hey, you should do it. Yeah, I'm planning to race that one, but yeah, we should preview the course, catch a jog before then.
I agree, man. I agree. And I wanted to ask you real quick, or have you talk about. I saw your online Run Tyler, your coaching program. You've gotten a lot of people really, really fast down to some quick times, and you're working with like a lot of cross country and people,
Yeah.
but you also have other people as well. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you got that started, how that coaching came around, and some of the, I guess some of the results you've seen from that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So when I graduated college, I coached in high school for a year in 2009, and uh, I would have continued, I think, except I always had this feeling of like, if one of these kids gets lost, one of the parents is going to have my head. Like I love the coaching, all that kind of stuff, but I just, for some reason, was like ever aware of like, if something goes wrong, it's gonna be my head on a platter. So I did though get to transition into coaching at the collegiate level from 2010 till 2016. I guess that in 2009 I did have a kid who he got second at state in the 2 mile and first at state in the mile. That was private school, but he ran pretty well, and I was super proud of him. But anyway, so did college for 6 years. That was at UT Tyler.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, a lot of those groups did great. Conference champions like 3K steeple and 800 and 1500 and 5K, 10K. So they had a lot of success. I had a lot of fun. I mean, it's just always been a passion. I kind of, at least in high school, I didn't have a good coach. I would say I had a good coach in college, but and we didn't even have a coach my freshman and sophomore year in high school. And so I became fascinated with like, how do you get better at this thing? Because I really had no other options, because I didn't have a coach essentially in high school. So yeah, I was just curious. And so I kind of remained curious, even though I had a good coach in college. And then working with people, just seeing people's different personalities and what they respond to. And I was learning kinesiology, so exercise science. And so I was just like pairing all that stuff together, my passion, and then also seeing, what's been learned so far. So yeah, did that until my first son was born in 2016. I took a break from coaching for 2 years, and the passion just never went away. And so I was actually pretty close to saying yes to the head coach position at UT Tyler. They had made an offer, but I decided to go a different direction. And so I still teach at the university. That's my full-time, that's my day job, so to speak. And um, and so I decided to start coaching on the side. And it started really small in 2018. I mean, it's like really a shout out to those people who like believed or trusted me early on. It was like 3 adult fitness people. It's like these are weekend warriors. People wanted to get better, and I was happy to help them. But I mean, I had coached for 7 years, but it was all like 22-year-olds and younger. And so now I'm working with like people in their mid 30s and their mid 40s. It's just a totally different. And so actually, when I started Run Tyler, I had almost entirely, it started with the core three. But so that went from like 3 to 6 to 10 to kind of pre-COVID year. That eventually I was almost entirely, it was like 25 adult runners.
Wow.
Uh, like working professionals. I had like two high schoolers because I wasn't really in that realm. And I wasn't on Instagram. I found out like they're all on Instagram and they want stuff posted to Instagram. So once I got on there and was like sharing successes, but I actually got connected up with a kid named Ian Salter. He had just finished his ninth grade cross country season, or no, sorry, track season, ninth grade track season. So it was the summer before he's going to go into sophomore year. And the way I got connected with him was it was my sister's friend's son. So, and that's how it goes sometimes, you know. Again, because people didn't really know my track record outside of the people I directly work with, and especially my collegiate athletes. And so he had these dreams of what he wanted to do. He would probably attest to this as well. When he was younger, he was an also ran. Like he did a 5 15 mile freshman year. I mean, that's good, but I mean, there's lots of kids. I mean, there's freshmen all over the state running 430 to 450 these days, even in his era. This is just 2019, something like that. And so I started working with him, and he had big dreams. And so I said, hey, I believe you, but here's what it's going to take. So, but he hopped on board. Like he was there, and he was a super committed athlete. I've worked with a lot of committed athletes, but he was way up there. And he finished his high school career with a 416 mile
Wow.
at the very end. So, I mean, of the kids who ran 416 or anywhere near that, I doubt there was more than five who started at a 515 mile or whatever as their best as a freshman. So he did really well. He progressed incredibly well. He was actually doing a lot of cross training. He even had some. He was kind of a more injury prone. I've had athletes who weren't injury prone at all, and some who were, and he happened to be. But you work around that. I mean, there was a girl from Flower Mound who had one of the top three times in the country, and she was doing more cycling than she was running. So sometimes you just have to do it because she was injury prone. And so it's, that's just how it goes sometimes. But he ran great. He broke the school record. He actually broke the school record over a guy named Haftu Knight, who is now Haftu's at UT Austin right now. It's his senior year. He's an All-American. He's a phenomenal athlete. But it wasn't a small record to break. And when he went 416, it was a USA top 25 when he did it. And so that kind of is what spread that, the word of mouth goes from there. And then I lucked out, continuing to work with athletes who are, it's not just the talented ones. I mean, I've worked with some talented athletes, but it's the ones that are just hungry, and that's actually, even of the talented ones, that's what I'm looking for. Because actually it hails back to 2009 with the kid who won at state and got second at state. He had all these sports competing for his attention, and he was just a freshman. And I told his dad, I saw it, like I told his dad, I think that your son can run a 412 mile by the time he's done with his high school career. And it was a big if. I said, if he likes it, if he wants to keep doing it. He just that So his name was Austin. He just had too many things pulling at him, and I had a sense that he didn't necessarily enjoy it. And if you're ever going to push your boundaries, you have to enjoy it to some degree. And so it's a darn shame, like if I meet someone who's like uber talented and they don't really quite have that inside of them, like I try to find a way to encourage them to try to find it if they can.
Yeah.
But it's always a little, someone who loves the sport is always a little sad when I see that. But so I had one athlete named Jacob Berryhill last year from Pittsburgh, Texas. He was cutting his time down. He finished with the 9:22 and the 2 mile at state. I think that was fourth on the day. He was so close to the podium, but he broke like a 60-year-old school record.
Wow.
So, and I mean, I have too many stories, but so I'll try not to share too many of them. But Jacob was a gamer. I mean, he still is. He's running for UT Tyler this year,
Yeah.
but he's a gamer, and so there's little stories that like I pick up and I learn from my athletes. Different mindsets, mentalities, how they handle disappointment. Jacob was a really cool story in my mind where he would have bad races. Like people look at his results and yeah, he progressed, but like what people probably will gloss over is he had like during his track season, senior track season, he had 2 or 3 bad races. And I felt like bad enough that an athlete who had a weak mindset, they would let it eat them up. And I remember talking to him after a Texas Distance Festival out over there in kind of the Dallas area. He had a bad race, and he just looked at me. I mean, he was almost like coaching me up. He was like, you know what? I've had bad races before. It is what it is. And yeah, he just kind of he never let that really get to him. And that's kind of one of those things that I'll never forget, and something I try to encourage athletes now, to try to adopt a little bit of that mindset. And I'm lucky enough I get to share stories of kids who've had floundering segments in their career, so to speak, and then they bust out of it. You just gotta kind of keep faith and hope and just keep grinding. But yeah, it's that's been a blast working. So I'm working a lot more with high schoolers, middle schoolers now. Um, but I still do work with adults. It's just less than I used to. And part of that was my own focus that I switched to try to push my services in regard to younger athletes, but still like working with both. And I actually have one adult athlete right now. I coach him and his son. His son is doing really, really well. Has already run like 1740 something in the 5K as a freshman. But so that freshman's dad is like, he came to me and said, I want to get my 5K better. And he was starting out with like a 24 and change, and he had been training, and he just last Saturday ran 21:08, but it was like in the heat. And I told him, I was like, if it's cool outside, you can run like a 2015 or 2030. I really think you can. And so he's improving real fast. And then he did a triathlon like randomly. Like he messaged me and he was like, hey, the Rose City Triathlon's this weekend. Can I do it instead of my long run? I was like, oh yeah, that's all good. Again, like part of my philosophy is like enjoyment. So I'm like, does it sound fun? Okay, go for it. And like he was somehow really, really good on the bike too. So he's doing another triathlon this Sunday because he's like, all of a sudden, that's like a new open door for him. He's like, oh, I guess I'm good at triathlon too. So
That's pretty cool, man. Yeah, I mean that's awesome to hear. Like all the successes that have come out of your coaching program. Like that's really cool to hear about. All those stories. I think that's encouraging for people too. So yeah, man, y'all check out Run Tyler. I'll leave it down in the description. I don't know if you're accepting any more people, but
I have a few spots to kind of keep just yeah, I try not to let it get too big.
yeah,
But I have a few spots, yeah.
sweet man. Well, I we are coming out of time here, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing everything that you shared. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Yeah.
where can people find you at?
I guess you can holler at me on Facebook if you search Run Tyler, or on Instagram, Run Tyler. You'll see kind of a little logo with the running man and run. And or you can email me runtylercoaching@gmail.com. So any of those methods work, and happy to figure out, if it's a good match. I mean, that's kind of what you're looking for too, coach athlete. But yeah, it's always fun to work with new people, and I definitely appreciate you inviting me on the show. And we do, I'll be your guide for Tyler State Park, if we can catch a run sometime. But yeah, I really appreciate it, man.